They call me a teacher, a philosopher, a mentor to minds still learning the weight of thought, the burden of questions without answers. In the polished corridors of the university hospital, I'm Professor Rachel Lawson, 38 years old, composed, articulate, the very picture of intellectual authority. I guide young men and women through the complexities of ethics, metaphysics, and moral reasoning. I am respected, admired, untouchable. But when I come home, I shed that version of myself like a snake's skin. My house is quiet most evenings. My husband, David, is an architect, a kind man, predictable. We share dinners in silence, sleep in the same bed without touching. He doesn't see me, not really. Not the way I long to be seen. He's 49 and content in his routines. I've become part of the wallpaper to him, useful, present, but overlooked. I do not blame him for what I've become. There is a room in our house he believes is locked. So does our son. They both assume it's for storage, or maybe some old academic project I've long abandoned. But it's not locked for technical reasons. It's locked for emotional ones. That room is mine. My sanctuary. My escape. My reckoning. Inside, the lighting is warm and low, and the air carries a faint trace of sandalwood. Velvet drapes cover the windows, muting the light even in the height of day. There's a chaise lounge by the wall, books stacked beside it, some rare, some forbidden. A mirror with a gilded edge sits across from it, tall enough to show more than reflection, sometimes almost memory. There, I allow the other side of me to breathe. The woman who once craved touch not just of the body, but of the soul. The woman whose passions once burned too bright and were forced to dim for the sake of marriage, motherhood, and status. Here she walks freely. I never thought I would find that heat again, until recently. Our son, Josh, turned 18 last month. He is bright, thoughtful. Too thoughtful. He notices things others don't. Things I wish he wouldn't. He has my eyes, the same shade of brown that darkens at the edges when lost in thought. When he was younger, he would ask me questions I wasn't prepared to answer. About people, about choices, about how to tell the difference between right and almost right. I used to smile, proud of his curiosity. Now it unnerves me. He's grown tall, his body lanky, and still adjusting to adulthood. There's a quiet confidence in him lately that wasn't there before, a subtle awareness of the effect he has on others, especially women. I've seen the way his classmates glance at him when he waits for me outside my lecture hall. I've seen the way he glances back. Sometimes he glances at me the same way. And sometimes I don't look away. This morning, I caught him lingering by the door to the locked room. He didn't touch the handle, just stared at it. I was in the hallway, just out of sight, watching. Something flickered across his face. Curiosity, yes, but also something deeper. He reached out, as if to test the doorknob, but stopped. His hand hovered, trembled slightly, then dropped. When he turned away, I stepped into view and called his name. He flinched, just slightly, but turned around with that practiced casualness teenage boy's perfect. "Mom," he said, his voice even. "What's in that room?" I paused for a beat too long. Then I smiled. "Just old books and grading papers I don't want disturbed." He didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes. But he nodded anyway. That evening, I sat alone in my secret room. I lit the candles, opened one of my journals, and ran my fingers along the words I had written over the years, fragments of dreams, of fantasies too bold to speak aloud. My pen hovered over a fresh page. I found myself writing his name before I could stop. I tore out the page. This is dangerous. I know that. I am not confused about boundaries or roles. I am a mother. I am a wife. I am a teacher. But I am also a woman. And in the soft hush of this room, I let that truth breathe. I think he sees me. The real me. In the way he watches me when I sip my coffee in the mornings. In how his gaze lingers a heartbeat too long when I pull my hair back. In how he once, absent-mindedly, reached for a strand of it that had fallen across my shoulder, then quickly pulled his hand back, blushing. Or maybe I imagine it. Maybe I want to imagine it. But something is shifting between us. It lives in the silences, in the unasked questions, in the quiet pulse of our daily routine. And it scares me, because the truth is, if he ever turned that doorknob, I don't know if I would stop him. The next evening unfolded like most others. Quiet dinner, clinking utensils, conversation as thin as paper. David talked about a new commercial building project, clean lines, exposed beams, an atrium that would let light pour in like water. I nodded, smiled, offered my thoughts, but my mind was elsewhere. On the room, on the door, on Josh, whose eyes had lingered on me again that morning just a fraction too long. Later, in bed, David reached for me. There was no fire in his touch, only routine. He kissed me softly, the kind of kiss that knew no edge, no risk. I let it happen. I always let it happen. And afterward, when he sighed with satisfaction and rolled onto his side, already halfway to sleep, I stared at the ceiling. I wasn't satisfied. Not even close. I waited until his breathing deepened, steady and slow. Then I slipped silently from the bed, careful not to let the floorboards betray me. My bare feet found their way down the hallway in the dark, past the framed photos of our family, smiles captured in a time that feels borrowed now. I unlocked the door to the secret room with practiced ease. Inside, the air greeted me like a familiar lover. I lit the small lamp on the desk. Its glow cast soft shadows on the walls, warming the room with an amber hush. I crossed to the chaise lounge, sat slowly, then reached into the drawer beneath it. My phone was already there, along with the soft pink silicone toy I kept hidden away. My secret instrument, shaped not just for pleasure, but for presence, a means to return to myself when everything else in my life demanded I disappear. I stared at the toy in my hand, not just as an object, but a symbol of rebellion, of reclamation, of everything I wasn't allowed to say aloud. I opened a private video on my phone, one I had made weeks ago in this very room. My face wasn't visible, but the sound of my breathing, my gasps, was real, unguarded. I watched, letting the memory of that freedom flood back into me. And then I closed my eyes. My fingers moved, slow and deliberate. The hum of the toy filled the room, gentle and insistent. I leaned back, let my mind drift, not to my husband, but to the look Josh had given me by the kitchen doorway. That half-curious, half-challenging gaze. The way he tilted his head when I walked past, as if he were reading between the lines of my movements. That look lived rent-free in the back of my mind now. I hated that I noticed. I hated that it thrilled me. The toy pulsed softly against me, and I let out a quiet breath. I didn't want fireworks. I wanted to feel something, something real. Something David hadn't given me in years. My mind blurred with sensation, with the secret, the thrill, the danger of being seen. What would Josh do if he ever found out? If he ever saw me like this? The thought twisted something deep inside me. I bit my lip, the tension curling tighter in my belly. My legs tensed, and with one slow exhale, I let the wave pass through me, quiet but overwhelming. I collapsed gently back into the cushions, heart fluttering, body relaxed for the first time in weeks. But it wasn't just release I felt. It was guilt, relief, longing. I wiped my eyes. I hadn't realized I'd started crying. The toy lay quietly on the pillow beside me, and I stared up at the ceiling once more. The silence returned, heavier now, dense with questions. How long could I keep this door closed? And more importantly, did I even want to? I had just begun to gather myself, the breath still uneven in my chest, the faint vibration of the toy echoing in my thoughts. The soft amber light of the lamp wrapped the room in a kind of dreamy haze, and for a moment, I let myself melt into the silence. And then I heard it. A knock. Soft, hesitant. Just 2 taps. I froze. No one knocked on this door. My heart stuttered. I pulled the blanket from the chaise and sat up, the warmth still clinging to my skin, a mix of heat and disbelief settling over me. Another knock, this time accompanied by a voice. "Mom?"
Josh.
His voice was low, careful, as if even saying my name through that door felt forbidden. I panicked. Everything inside me screamed to stay silent, to let him walk away, thinking the room was as locked as he always believed. But instead, I moved, almost unconsciously, toward the door, stopping inches away, my breath catching in my throat. "Yes," I said, my voice hushed. I saw the light. I couldn't sleep. I hesitated. I should have told him to go back to bed, to pretend he'd never seen the glow beneath the door. But I didn't. I opened it. And in that moment, the world shifted. I stood there in the doorway, caught not in the persona of Rachel Lawson, professor, mother, wife, but as the woman I became only in this room. I had changed earlier, before my ritual, a long, black latex maxi suit that hugged every contour of my body, sculpted like second skin. My hair was pulled back tightly, my lips dark with smudged crimson. Around my neck hung a simple chain, and on my fingers, rings that felt like armor. I didn't try to cover myself. He stood frozen, eyes wide, not with confusion, but with awe. The silence stretched. His gaze swept the room behind me, the dim light, the velvet drapes, the mirror reflecting us both in fragmented silhouettes. And then back to me. "This is yours," he asked, voice barely a whisper. I nodded. I didn't know," he added, eyes locking onto mine again. "I didn't know you had this side." I swallowed. "No one does." His eyes held mine unblinking. "But it's you, isn't it?" The way he said it, soft, reverent, made something inside me tremble. He wasn't mocking me. He wasn't afraid. He was mesmerized, as if the woman standing before him wasn't someone shameful, but someone he'd always sensed existed beneath the surface. "I'm sorry," I murmured. "You weren't meant to see this." He shook his head slowly. "I think maybe I was." The room held its breath. Or maybe I did. There was no judgment in his eyes. Only a strange understanding I wasn't prepared for. He stepped forward, just inside the threshold, careful, respectful, but undeniably drawn in. The walls of the house felt distant now. So did the life we'd all been pretending to live. For the first time, I didn't feel alone in this space. For the first time, I was seen. And the question I didn't dare ask now echoed in the silence. What happens next? Josh crossed the threshold like he was stepping into another world. And in truth, he was. The black latex still clung to my skin, the room thick with candlelight and unsaid things. I watched him with guarded breath, uncertain whether to send him away or let him stay. And he simply looked around, quietly absorbing everything. He walked slowly, his eyes skimming the walls, the mirror, the chaise lounge where I had just been moments ago. Finally, he turned to me, still standing in the doorway. "Is Dad meeting your needs?" he asked softly. The question caught me off guard. Not because it was shocking, but because of how simply he asked it. As though the truth had always been just beneath the surface, waiting for someone to acknowledge it aloud. "No," I answered, without hesitation. Because if he was, this room wouldn't exist. Josh gave a slow, thoughtful nod, like he had already guessed. He moved toward the chaise lounge and sat down, his tall frame folding into the space I had just warmed. He didn't ask me to explain myself. He didn't press. He just watched, head tilted slightly, that quiet curiosity glinting in his eyes. Then, with a kind of quiet boldness, he reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a cookie, wrapped in a napkin. A ridiculous gesture, and yet in the warmth of that room, it felt intimate. He held it out to me, the cookie balanced lightly between his fingers. I stepped forward, slowly, unsure what we were doing or where this line even was anymore. But I leaned down, lips brushing against the cookie as I took it gently from his hand. Our eyes met. He smiled faintly, then whispered, "Good girl." The words hit me harder than they should have. Not because of what they meant, but because of how right they felt. My cheeks flushed. I looked away, but he wasn't finished. "Do you like being a kitty?" he asked, gesturing softly at the suit. His voice was teasing, curious, but there was something deeper behind it. I opened my mouth to deflect, to make a joke. But instead, the truth tumbled out before I could stop it. Yes, I whispered. It lets me be who I really am. Josh didn't laugh. He didn't smirk. He just nodded slowly again, as though he understood more than he should. As though this strange, quiet room had given us permission to be honest for once. I crossed the room and sat on the edge of the lounge beside him, keeping a small but deliberate space between us. It wasn't distance. It was respect. And it was tension, not the dangerous kind. The kind that says, I see you. The kind that doesn't need to cross any lines to change everything. We sat there for a long time, not saying much. Just being. The quiet in the room had transformed, not awkward now, but warm. Protective. As if the air itself had wrapped around us and decided to hold space for something new, something tentative and tender. It wasn't just a hidden room anymore. It had become a bridge. And though neither of us said it aloud, we both knew the relationship between us had shifted. Not by force, but by truth. Josh sat silently beside me on the lounge, the room wrapped in shadows and soft candlelight. The tension between us had shifted, no longer laced with hesitation, but filled with something wordless and thick. He was watching me, not with judgment, but with understanding, and that made it all the more dangerous. Then, without warning, he stood up. Wait here, he said quietly. I blinked, startled. Josh, what? He raised a hand gently. Just trust me. I'll be right back. And then he disappeared through the door, leaving it slightly ajar. I stayed seated, unsure of what was happening. My heart beat faster. The candlelight flickered against the black sheen of the suit I wore, the latex reflecting gold where it curved around me. I stared at myself in the mirror, my real self, not the one who lectures about reason and stoicism. Here, I wasn't the teacher. I wasn't the wife. I was just me. Or maybe more than me. I heard his footsteps returning after a few minutes. Quiet, steady, deliberate. He came back into the room, and in his hands was a small white porcelain bowl of milk. He didn't say a word. He just walked across the room with that same gentle focus, placed it in front of the mirror at my feet, and stepped back. It was ridiculous. Tender. Thoughtful. Bold. And it was exactly right. My throat tightened. Not from embarrassment, but from the sheer, quiet shock of being understood. Without breaking his gaze, I shifted from the lounge to the floor, my movements slow and purposeful. The tile was cool against my knees. I leaned down slightly, lips brushing the edge of the bowl, and lowered my head. I didn't sip, not really. It wasn't about the milk. It was about the moment. It was play. It was permission. It was truth. Josh knelt beside me, his presence solid and calm. He didn't speak. Didn't make a joke. Just watched with quiet reverence. When I finally looked up from the bowl, his face was inches from mine. His expression was open, not forceful, not assuming. Just there. Like he had been waiting for me to make the next move. And maybe it was the candlelight. Maybe it was the pulse still thudding in my ears. Maybe it was the way I had never felt so seen in my life. But I leaned in. Just a breath. And his lips met mine. Soft. Slow. No rush. Just warmth. Understanding. Electricity. It was a kiss made of questions, not answers. And yet, it answered everything. We pulled away, eyes still locked, breathing barely a whisper in the room that now held a new silence. Not one of shame, but of connection. The kind that changes everything.